All right, we have the board meeting up, which is most likely a duplicate of what we already saw at the town hall, but who knows? They may have some different information here. Let's go.
It's it's a retreat, but it's not a formal business meeting. Do I need to call everyone?
Retreat. What
It's
is
still
it?
a public meeting, so go
Okay.
ahead and call it to order.
All right. Well, I'll call the meeting of the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon, which is TRIMET, Board of Directors retreat to order for November 19th, 2020. And Doug, I'll make a couple of quick remarks and then turn it over to you, okay?
Great picture.
Thank you.
All right. So first off, good afternoon to everybody. I want to thank the board, those involved in the work that we're going to hear about today.
Let's get that cheerleading going.
For just the time to go through this very important topic. And for those of you who have not been involved before, this is the time each year when we as the board meet in a more informal way to make sure we're all on the same page about what's going on and what the priorities and policy issues are that we need to work on for the next year as we move forward into our development of the next year's budget. And it really does allow the board to talk and discuss any of those needed changes.
I want to know why this guy's still on the board. Now we're 1 year in. He's been on this board 9 years as the chairman, okay? 9 years. His term was supposed to be up last year. That's the kind of corruption you have in Oregon, okay? This is corruption. And they're going to say, well, it's COVID-19. We can't, anybody can replace him. You don't need to even go to a meeting anymore. You just turn on your computer at home. But they have a reliable crony there, and that's why they're leaving him there.
Changes or policy directions. So for about the next 3 hours, we're going to hear from those involved in helping us take a fresh look at our safety and security programs and how we can provide a safe, secure, and welcoming transit service for all riders. And that's one of our overlying values as an organization. For a little bit of background, for those of you who may be participating the first time today, you should know that improvements to our safety and security and equity programs have been priorities for this board for the last few years. And I'm proud of some of the changes that we've made during this time. And for those of you who aren't aware of all of them, I think that this morning you'll hear kind of a recap of what we have done over the last few years to improve and help address community concerns. I couldn't go turn it over to you, Doug, without mentioning the last 10 months, I think, have rocked all of us with some really, truly unforeseen events that are going to shape the future for some time to come.
All right, let's a little background on Warning here. This guy is the proverbial insider government technocrat. He's just been around forever, man. Okay, Bruce Warner, this first article here is about him retiring from the Portland Development Commission, spending 5.5 years at the helm of the Portland Development Commission, and 4 decades working in public sector. He's ready to retire. He will stay in the agency role, part-time advisor, as an advisor. Yeah, they like to do that. Before the Portland Development, which is now called Prosper Portland, they like their little cutesy name. Warner served as a director of ODOT. He also served as Metro Chief's Operating Officer, Washington County's Director of Land Use, and as City Engineer. Yes, this guy has been around for fucking ever. He knows all the insiders. He's the ultimate insider. And he needs to go, man, okay? But Kate Brown will never get rid of him because they need reliable cronies in these important positions.
I think those include the coronavirus, how lethal it is, how easily it's spread, the adverse economic impacts caused.
He's a nice enough guy, by the way. I've talked to him before. And I have nothing against him personally. He's been very personable to me when I talked to him. But, I know who he is. You can be a nice guy, but I know you're a crony, and I don't know if I wouldn't call it downright corruption. It's the wink and the nod corruption. You know, Portland is a little bit more advanced in their corruption than most of the places are. They know how to do it within the law.
By this virus and its disparate impact on people of color and those with limited incomes. The death of George Floyd and the resultant protests to eliminate systemic racism by the police and others. And then what I've been seeing here just recently is the polarization of America continues. I think we saw it as part of the presidential election. So that, along with calls by our stakeholders to change the ways we ensure safety on our system, bring us to the day's dialogue. So I believe that we will probably take some time before we get beyond the coronavirus threat and we get back to some sort of normalcy. But it's my hope that we can actually talk and think about how to address these challenges and really turn them into opportunities that can position public transit in the region to come back stronger and better. So I also hope that all of us will participate in the discussions today to continue what I consider our journey to change and excellence, and specifically today about safety and security programs, and that includes staffing and priorities. So I'm looking forward to this day and hearing from all the people involved, Doug. So with that long introduction, I guess I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Board President, and welcome everybody who's listening in today, as well as to the board members. I do appreciate the opportunity to come before you with particularly such an important topic as part of our strategy session. This really is the strategy session for today, because it's such an important time, not just for our system, and as you, President Warner, have indicated, but it's really for a broader community that we serve here in the Tri-County metropolitan area. You know, several months ago, we set into motion our review and reimagining what public safety efforts could look like. But as you've indicated, President Warner, this is not the start of our work. We've actually been undertaking this work for some years. I'll give you examples. From decriminalizing fare evasion, to making the citation process easier, to providing affordable fares for over 30,000 users now, which is really substantial, to rethinking how our police system and relationships should work. We've been continually here at TRIMET trying to be introspective in our work, and we continue to do that, and that's part of what today is really about. Our current focus and work...
there's a lot of people that would say that's bullshit. Not just me. I know nobody cares what I think. But, you know, I know there's a lot of people. I can name them off. A lot of them are members of BRU, Bus Riders Unite, and Opal, and other activists that I don't know, but I see them on the Twitter that don't agree with this whatsoever.
To examine and rethink our approach to safety in our system was really born and catalyzed by the senseless killing of George Floyd on May 25th, along with new...
Yeah, now, you know, this is all very nice, but this is, you know, it's got nothing to do with TRIMET. I don't want to be a downer here, but...
numerous other tragedies and other national responses which followed. We all saw and experienced, aghast at times, with the understandable unrest, the subsequent protests, which even involved regrettable violence. The acts of mourning, the displays of frustration and anger.
And guess what? Not a goddamn thing has changed as a result of any of it. There's been a lot of posturing and, you know, public relations stuff. The cops are still beating the shit out of citizens and blacks. They're doing it right out in the open. They do it on camera. Not a goddamn thing has changed. And the thing about it is it happens more in the blue cities and the blue states and more than the red cities. I mean, place like Houston, red state, you know, you don't see any of this. You don't see it in Boston either, really. I haven't heard of it. We were having this kind of social unrest here, like Portland. Portland is like the hub of this racial divide. It's odd that that's become the actual center of the divide, especially since it's actually the whitest city in America, which is even more interesting.
And public stand for the far too many individuals of color who've suffered egregious acts of violence, some of them highly publicized. but many of them have been overlooked. It highlighted very clearly continued racial disparity, injustice, discrimination, and it became a further rally cry for needed changes. It did magnify the racial cracks in our society, the cracks that have been historically, in some cases, quickly patched, overlooked, and frankly, in some cases, just ignored. In a message to employees here at TriMet in June, I noted this was a time for growth and a time for courage. Courage to face challenges and adversity directly. Courage to identify the problems and sincerely and authentically work to solve them and create change and to chart a course of change. This is as true today as it was then. And I'm looking forward to this discussion of what we can accomplish together and some of the work that's been done here that you're going to see here shortly. You know, recently I got a question is, why did TriMet feel the need to start working on the issue when the overwhelming call for change was directed at police? Well, to me, that answer is multifaceted. First and foremost, TriMet relies on the support from local law enforcement to ensure the safety of our riders and our employees. We couldn't do it without the support of dedicated regional law enforcement. And in fact, just last night, we had 19 calls for police response across this very wide, large system. Because of this close partnership, we had the responsibility, though, to evaluate our approaches and how we can and must do better and evolve. Second, for me, when I look at public transit, I believe we get a true snapshot of our community. After all, we are a reflection of the communities that we serve. Most of it is all good, but there are challenges that come with some parts of running a system such as this. You do get a clear picture, though, for sure, of what we face every day, what our frontline staff face, what our customers sometimes see throughout the region. It can be issues with homelessness, mental health, or even basic access to transit. While it can be easy to ignore or look past, you can see the lasting effects of decades-old racism, even in our urban planning, through even historic redlining, areas of underinvestment, lack of walkable neighborhoods, and construction of highways throughout the historic minority communities, and even association with the pollution. And we're part of that pollution, and we're taking steps to correct those things. But this is not just unique to TriMet or to Portland, the Portland region. It could probably be said of every major metropolitan transit agency and city in this country. TriMet was created nearly 51 years ago now, and that was only a few short years after the Civil Rights Act and 1 year after the Fair Housing Act. It would be short-sighted, I think, to not acknowledge that we are trying to advance transit equity and our safety practices, but within a larger bubble and a larger system that's working to address structural systemic racism and bias. As an agency, we are very closely interwoven, I think, as we all know here, with our community. We have an obligation to start conversations just like we're doing now. Back on July 20th of this year, TriMet redirected $1.8 million in police funding, as well as some additional funding to explore new community-based.
Well, so far it's all, nothing. But we're going to get through this anyway.
Services to expand our safety approach.
Yeah.
We then turned to the community, as you're about to see. We not only wanted and needed to listen, but more importantly, we wanted actionable rider community feedback to help shape and create tangible and preliminary steps to charting a new course of change, as well as helping us form longer-term approaches and plans to improve safety and the rider experience for all our customers. There are some things you will see today that we want to action in quick, some things that are going to take a longer period of time. I do really want to thank today, though, our TriMet team internally. This has been led, this great initiative over a short period of time by John Gardner, and as well
yes, John, you're wonderful.
Members,
yes, you're
as long as a dozen community-based organizations across this region. TriMet allocated just over several months between 40 to 50 of our valuable staff, knowing the importance of this. And I would suggest
50 staff that has nothing else to do anyway. Who are you trying to kid? You know, I know it's his job to make them look good, but come on, let's not be ridiculous. You got this huge goddamn bureaucracy over there sitting at home anyway.
We're probably one of a few agencies, if not the only agency in the state, that's allocated this much resource in this compressed time frame to try and chart what hopefully you will and what you will see later today. So I do want to thank this amazing team. We did have received encouraging level of feedback from community engagement.
Rah, TRIMET, yay!
I did learn, I think I've mentioned before, strategy can in fact does not have to always take a long time. I think this is an example of some of the conversations that we're going to have today. I do want to acknowledge the team did develop and launch a public survey to solicit feedback about how police and security presence affects riders. What makes them feel safe? What makes them feel unsafe? And what way does this agency need to change to continue to improve, to continue to care for the community? The North Star for me is the care of community and our role in care of community. And again, as we all know in our vision, mission, and values, welcoming to all. In our research, we really wanted to have an expansive look at this, and John Gardner will get into a lot more detail as long as those join us today from DHM Research. But we received more than 12,500 responses, of which 700 of them were non-English responses, which I think is terrific. We also worked with 42 separate organizations, championed and in partnership with Portland United Against Hate and the Coalition of Communities of Color to gather feedback, amongst others, about our approaches to safety. You're going to hear from a few of them actually here shortly. DHM Research also led various focus groups with key TRIMET stakeholders from our volunteer advisory committees to our system riders, and yes, our frontline staff and our union members and leadership. The feedback and research to help inform TRIMET's recently convened Public Transit Safety Advisory Committee. That's what we were previously referring to as the Blue Ribbon Committee, so I'll refer to it as the Advisory Committee. They were made up of local thought leaders and national experts, many who delivered direct service.
Who came up with that thought leader idea? Where'd that come from? You're not my thought leaders. You people are not selected by me. You're foisted on us. We don't select you. You are selected by, I suppose it's the oligarchy, not us.
This is every single day to homeless, to the individuals of low incomes, and many other critical and vital groups in this community. This advisory committee reviewed the feedback and system research and worked to develop a series of recommendations to create a safer and welcoming system for the region's public transit riders. I have personally reviewed every single page of all the documents, about 4 or 5 inches thick. There's a great amount of feedback and research in this. I do want to thank everybody in the community who provided feedback, who took their valuable time to spend time with us to help us, to push us, to test us. Without them, none of this would have been possible.
Yeah, Mr.
I also want to appreciate the advisory committee's work. It really was intense for them. There was a number of meetings, as you're going to see, over a very short period of time with an immense amount of data coming at them. But before I hand it off, I want to thank all of you as members of the board in advance of what you're about to see and the conversation, which is even more important to follow, to help us. And I look forward to a positive and constructive strategy session that will help, as President Warner, you've indicated, help inform us as to the building of our financial allocation of financial priorities and ultimately our business plan, of which we are going to commit to execute. Each of you, I know, has great, unique perspectives, and we need to hear those today. So thank you. I do know at times, particularly in these times, we have limited resources, and they're pulling in many.
You have limited resources, except for capital projects. Limited resources. $9 trillion has been issued to the oligarchy from the Fed, but there's limited resources for everything else. You know, these technocrats will always toe the oligarchy line about this. They will never deviate from the story of how all the money went somewhere else, and now we're left holding the bag.
Different directions, and they overlap sometimes. But what is very clear when I reflect upon this work today is what we do have in common is this is a very important piece of work at a very important time. So it's just the first step. It's not the end. Again, the North Star for me is how we translate to be a welcoming, long-term, the pursuit of being a welcoming organization and helping that we are seen as a thought leader of caring for this community. So those would be my
Yes,
opening comments.
yes,
What
you're
I'd
not
like to do
thought
now
leader.
is firstly
Stop.
remind you that there will be a couple of breaks, but there is a lot of information to come at you here today, culminating at the end with some recommendations, and then looking for, I would solicit from everybody, a healthy and robust conversation to help give us feedback. So, John, I'm now going to turn it over to you to work us through the next key parts of the agenda. So, thank you.
And here comes John.
All right, and thank you, Doug, and good morning, good afternoon, President Warner, members of the board. I'm going to share my screen when Jeff gives me permission, and as Doug said, I'll begin sort of today's presentation.
Oh, look at them all.
All right, so
Look at
this
Ozzy.
is the board retreat discussion. We have a massive amount of good news and great ideas to share with you this afternoon. And I want to talk about the agenda before we get too deep into this. As Doug said, we're going to talk about the project in 3 sections. First, we want to give you a sense of the project at a glance. And then we're going to hear from a few of the advisory committee members. We have Marcus Mundy from the Coalition of Communities of Color, Jonathan Colon from Central Cultural, and I think we have Anthony Deloney from SEI, but we're still working on that connection. Then I'm going to provide a system snapshot as a shortened version of what we shared with the committee. And Marla Black, TRIMET's Executive Director of Safety and Security, is going to give you all a snapshot of what the safety information we shared with the committee. Then we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back, and you're going to receive 2 presentations from our research partners. One, a presentation on the online survey feedback we received, and another information and feedback on our community focus groups. We'll take one more break, and then we'll enter the final segment of today's presentation, where we go into the recommendations, both the recommendations developed by the Transit Public Safety Advisory Committee and the ultimate action steps that TRIMET leadership is wanting to move forward. So we're excited to share this with you all today, and we look forward to your questions. With that, I'll just begin.
They're all at home having a great time
project at a glance.
while there's mayhem.
So
while mayhem goes on the bus network, you know, I can show you some of the mayhem I've posted on the Twitter today. Here's our favorite Halloween costume. Where is that outfit? We want it. We'll pay money. Man, I do. Here they are. Let me find a good one here. Just so you can get a little. Just a little. Where is it? Here's a good one. No, I don't want to do that one. Here.
7240. 7240, got a request to talk. How can I help you? Did you also get my police request? I did not get a police request from you, just a request to talk. Well, I sent out a police request about 10 minutes ago, also already, but I got no return call. I'm glad I wasn't getting stabbed. Are you doing okay?
All right, that's enough of that. Okay, see, there is no security on the TriMet. Okay, just so you know, this is the current. This is without any changes. There's no police around to help you. So, okay, and we have hundreds of calls like this. So these people are in another world that doesn't really matter. They run the show, but they don't really have any idea what they're doing because they're removed from the show.
What was important to the committee and important to us is to understand that this project, this conversation, this undertaking was happening during a very tumultuous time in the country's history, let alone the local framework. And it was important that we approach this project not in a vacuum, but working to align it with regional efforts, both the efforts that's happening with and being led by leaders of color with the Reimagine Oregon Project, but also the work and efforts happening at the state level with the Governor's Racial Justice Council. And today you're going to hear a lot about the community outreach and feedback we participated in, but it's also important to note the research we did both with as it relates to our own system and our safety and security.
Yeah, here's all the
goddamn also as we looked
goddamn
across the country and trying to understand what was happening and how were other.
Here's all the institutional. Big squirrel. Rip City's got a post about that. Let's see if I can show you his post on big squirrel. Come on, where is it? Fucking stole that. I'll get lost. Here it is, flying squirrel. Oh, is that the same place as big squirrel? That's flying squirrel. I don't know if that's the same place. I don't know. It looks like it, doesn't it? I don't know. Okay, back to the show.
Their transit properties dealing with similar concerns. And we were able to leverage a lot of talent, both in the design of our outreach and our approach with DHM and the Coalition of Communities of Color.
DHM, I said this in the last video, they get a little piece of every single government contract there is. Insider cronies.
Researching other like transit agencies and looking again at our own system with partnerships with Big Squirrel and Portland State.
Big Squirrel.
Now, a core component of the information you're going to hear today is all about that community feedback, which was central to everything we did and informed all of our process. And you'll see that reflected later today in the recommendations. And that would not have been possible, as you all know, without a host of culturally specific community-based organizations spread across the Tri-County area. And we are forever in their debt because they did the lion's share of community engagement and leveraging their community expertise to ensure that their communities and their voices were part of this process.
Sportswear.
And so we're very excited to share with you all later the recommendations that we made.
Queen's underwear.
Finally, before I go too much further, we're going to try to get a little bit of feedback on the process from some of our community advisory committee members.
I mean, no better place than Big Squirrel to get your feedback from. Jesus, it's all corporate. You see, that's what I'm trying to tell you. Corporate. This is not connected to reality.
Group of local talent, as Doug said, who led us through that process and ultimately developed a series of recommendations that you're going to see a little later. But I want to see if we can hear first from Marcus Mundy, who served as the committee chair, and then Jonathan Colon, and then I'll try to work to get Anthony available today. But Marcus, do you mind just sharing a little feedback to the board around the process, your experience, and your thoughts and hopes for this work?
Marcus Monday. Okay, let's do Marcus Monday, and then we'll call it a night. This is going to probably be a 5-part series.
As it moves forward?
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. Thank you for letting me talk to you today. I'll share a few written thoughts and then some extemporaneous thoughts. So thank you to the board for letting me be here today and talk to you. I'm glad to see, I should note that it's such a diverse board at TRIMET, which we haven't seen in a long time, diverse in age, diverse in gender, diverse in ethnicity. The community sees that and they noted that, so that's very important. I did want to talk to you today, share a few of my thoughts about the Transit Public Safety Advisory Committee, TSAC. I don't know how you pronounce that acronym, but there you go. And I might have been called the chair of this committee, but it was more of an honorary title. The work was led by many others. My co-chair, Jonathan Colon, who you'll hear from, the members of the committee, and also just all the community organizations that participated. It was important. You saw the list, or you heard about the list. There were at least 42 community organizations and 12 or 13,000 people that were contacted about that, about this process. So I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud that so many people were contacted, that surveys were done. Even my own research team helped participate in the construction of the survey tool. But I don't ever want us to forget who got us here, and that was George and Brianna and Ahmad and so many others. And so my only...
All right, cut. Who is Marcus Monday? Let's see who he is. Coalition of Communities of Color. Marcus Monday has served of Coalition of Communities of Color since 2018. Prior to joining, Mr. Monday was principal at Monday Consulting LLC, an Oregon certified small business. His practice assisted clients in various disciplines, including but not limited to achieving equity and diversity, inclusion in personnel contracting, supplier diversity. He's a diversity guy. Okay. Prior to his role as consultant, he served as president and CEO of the Portland Urban League, was vice president and regional compliance officer for Kaiser Permanente. Okay, so he's a big shot in his own right.
The goal in this process is to uplift the voices of community. And there were some missing voices in this, and I want TriMet as we go forward to make sure that we're always including the CBOs, even if we disagree with them, that bring something else to the.
Here's Ozzy down here. You can see me point. He's always doing other work on these board. He's always doing something else. He's here, but he's doing other work.
Table, but I am glad the product will be better. But I am glad so many voices were heard from. Research, I always want.
Like Stovall won the Gresham mayor's race by 27 votes. I told you that guy was going to be a politician. I knew it. I saw that coming from day one, that he was going to be a politician, and damn it, he sure was.
Us to look at, even though we participated, always look at the community-based participatory model, the culturally specific model. One size does not fit all. And I think TriMet reflected and respected some of that, most of that in their work, but I think there's still room for improvement there.
Whoa. He just, whoa. Marcus Monday did not give them an A+. You hear that? Whoa. He just slammed them. He just slammed them there. You hear that? I think there's room for improvement.
That perhaps Jonathan or Anthony will reflect upon, but even if not, I heard feedback from the community that while this process addressed some of the concerns about policing, they were anxious to see a deeper dive, more robust concerns met, more focus on the community. I know that in some of the surveys, a lot of information was gathered about the employee.
Well, I like this guy. Okay. He looked like a hack to me when I was looking at his resume, but it looks like he's a truth teller, it sounds like.
And the staffing and their safety, and that is critically important. Everybody in the system wants the employees and the drivers and the operators of the trains and the technicians to be safe. But if we take care of the public first, I think we'll have a good outcome.
He's right.
And to be clear, before John hasn't gotten into all the recommendations yet, but I want to be clear that we support all of the recommendations that the team, the committee, and the staff put forward. We support them. It's just that if there's certain areas where the goals are stated as ambitious, we think are baseline starting points. And so we're going to, as community members, we're going to continue to give real-time feedback to both you commissioners, the staff, and we want to be involved with this process. But we think all the recommendations are good, but they're a starting point. I know it's tough for TriMet because TriMet is trying to thread a needle, and the community is trying to change a whole system, a whole transportation system. So we do have to meet in the middle, but I never want to discount the concerns. And TriMet has some trust building to do with the community as well. That came up several times in the process and the conversations. And to be fair, I think they reflected that in some of their findings and some of their recommendations. And again, they have 3 very strong recommendations and then a series of mid to long-term recommendations. And so I want us to talk about all of that because the community thinks there should be maybe a little bit more pace on some of the longer-term recommendations. So again, what I can promise you as a community member is to continue to push, to continue to work with TriMet. The process itself, though, it was inclusive. It was strong. I was glad to be part of it. We're not all singing out of the same hymn yet. Because as John mentioned and Doug mentioned, it was a rapid process. It was high intensity. There were a lot of meetings and a lot of moving parts and some tough time frames. But everybody, as far as I know.
All right, let me look at this here. Okay, reload. Guardian Angels make renewed push to patrol MAX trains. Now, for some unknown reason, I haven't heard a thing about this yet. Okay, this has been completely ignored by this so-called committee. Okay, what we want to do is serve. Okay, what we want to do is serve as a determinant. We want to wear the uniform because calling there's come and go Portland chapter. Okay, so they're not going to talk about this, which is extremely suspicious.
Everybody that was part of it is willing to engage more. So I'll wrap up with this. Is that
all right? Well, he started off good, but he ended weak with complimentary. You know what? I want to hear dissent. I want to hear. You just don't ever hear dissent about anything in any of these meetings. That's why they've got no credibility, because there's never dissenting voices. They're always in agreement with each other, which gives them no credibility.
and I haven't talked about it yet, but 1.8 million is not enough. So you'll hear that repeatedly,
Okay.
both from community.
That is not enough. That's like nothing. That's nothing. And that's a one-time, that's a one-time. And those, remember, that 1.8 million came from unfilled police spots. They had that money budgeted for more police. They didn't fill those jobs. That's where they got that money from.
Community and maybe even internally at TRIMET. For a $1.64 billion budget,
There you go.
the scale must change if you're really going to make these public safety changes.
Yes.
This whole thing will be doomed without.
I like it. Okay. He's hitting the nail on the head here in lots of ways. And then he's saying it was all a good process. But you can read between the lines in his statement is that he's not convinced.
Community participation, and that's not to say it's doomed. That's just to say we're here and we are your partners, and we'll be there. And again, Doug at the very beginning spoke about racial cracks in our systems and society, and I appreciated him saying that. But the CBOs you deal with are dealing with racial canyons and not cracks that separate our communities from public safety. So TriMet has to do more than the 1.8, more than just talking amongst themselves, but with community. And this process was a great start in those conversations. This process I'm proud to be part of, and we all appreciate this good start. And so I'll turn it back to you, John, but thank you for letting me share those thoughts.
All right. Well, he
Thank you, Marcus, and thank you for
he
being.
was very political about it. But I wrote I heard between the lines there.
Candid and just willing to work with us as we continue to move forward. Next, I'd like to invite Jonathan Colon to talk a little bit about his experience and just his hopes and support for us in this work going forward as well.
Who's next?
Thank you so much for having me and being part of this conversation. I'll follow up on Marcus's comments about where we are at the community level. I think this was a heavy lift. It's one of the TriMet processes that I've been involved in where it was quite transparent, and it was quite transparent from all the people at the conversations. We usually have one team or another team, but this was pretty transparent. You had the representation of not only internal, external, but the lived experience of both writers and the TriMet team from the different perspectives. And it was vulnerable. It was one of those spaces where I've not been in a long time, where there was a lot of vulnerable conversations being had by a very diverse group of people. And that is possible. It's just a lot more difficult in the time that we're in. I mean, so that's the other heavy lift in this, right? With all the moving parts and both on the political, on how we're defining how we see police and how we get police and how they show up for us, while we're looking at trying to move on the pandemic, to be able to get an agency to bring this level of transparency, this level of resource, data-driven, and some of the best practice that you incorporate into this process. It sets the tone for what TriMet can continue to do as we move forward. I would be remiss if I don't recognize that we would have not been here in my opinion, if it wasn't for the goodwill that have been built with the work of Martin Gonzalez, el señor John Gardner, who's here, Roberto, Nathan, Maria, and our Title VI guy, Mr. Green, who always reminds us of some of those deep dives of all the other compliance things that we have to do.
This guy is some kind of Hispanic. Central Cultural Washington County has served Latino families with ever-growing range of programs designed to create self-sufficient, engaged, and active citizens. Okay. I don't know. We use an equity lens. You hear that everywhere. That's just crap. I don't know.
To deal with. From a community perspective, I'm in Western Washington County. We use all the modes of transportation on sort of a rural setting. I happen to live in outer southeast, so trying to find a bridge on what was being said, it was totally covered within the different perspectives that were there. One of the things that I would add to this is that it's never enough, right? It's a start because this is a live organism that continues to grow and change. So I have to recognize that. You know, I was here when TRIMET led the conversation, and this is one of those legacy moves that TRIMET has the ability to do. The last time I was involved with one was when you created Interstate and you created what diversity in transportation looked like and set a model both for our local partners to look at how they included minority and women and communities of colors in transportation, and you lift that work. Whether it's perfect or not, you set the tone, and to be one of the early agencies to set the tone on policing and how we connect with community and how we listen to community, bringing those lessons learned from communities at such a deep commitment was really, really helpful. It's really fascinating for me, the recommendations, and I don't want to take anybody's thunder, but what I would say is if you observe that all the recommendations work in a circular model, so it doesn't matter where you start.
All right, I want to show you. Okay, Central Cultural de Washington County. Okay, this guy here is speaking. Wait a minute. Where's the about us? Is that where I'm at? Staff. Okay, this is the guy who's speaking. This guy. Jonathan Colon. Or Colon. So, Executive Director, Prosperidad Director, Director of Strategic Commission, Finance Director. So this is pretty big. This Program Manager, Program Coordinator. They got a lot of people here. Look. Okay, there's a lot of people here. This is a very advanced organization with a lot of Okay. Of course, that always worries me because it's a little bit too advanced.
You need all of those. And I think it was there was some synergy in the collective group that, you know, some of them became priorities in terms of where we start. But as Marcus mentioned, you know, we agree with all of them. We had different priorities on where we should start based on where we are geographically, the populations we're serving, and all the different components. But I would say that if you keep this as a high level, is they all interact with each other, and they all must be done to be successful as a system. So you're in the business of transportation and transporting. This is an opportunity to continue to do that, right? You have the cups of legacy work, and we're committed to supporting this conversation.
Well, he hasn't really said anything, has he? I haven't really heard anything useful from this guy.
It was just a start. Thank you.
All right, well, I have to get ready. It's late here, and I'm old. And so we'll stop here at 30 minutes, and this will be part 1.